Podsmashers of the internet, and welcome to another episode of
80-bit Podsmash,
Where Gaming Goes to Grab a Beer. We are your hosts,
Penguin and Termite. I'm Penguin.
I'm Termite, and we are a weekly video game podcast smashing together topics that you care about with video games.
Wayo. We are tonight going to be talking about mainstream stuff. So we'll talk about what mainstream means, how it's used in the greater cultural context, and how it applies to video games. And we'll try to be answering the question, does mainstream appeal ruin games? So that's the topic tonight. It kind of ties in with some of the other topics we've been talking about recently. So we wanted to try to hit it because we think it's kind of relevant.
Yeah, like innovating or not.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff.
And we are where gaming goes to grab a beer. So tonight we are drinking Atlas Brewing Company from Washington, D.C.'s Rowdy. The name of the beer is Rowdy. Part of the reason why I was drawn to it, I was like, I like that name for a beer. It is a hop-forward rye ale. I'm a big fan of rye ales personally. Don't really care much about the hop portion of it, but it doesn't ruin it in this case. So.
Yeah, I don't really taste much hops.
I do. Beer. I taste the bitter. It's actually funny because compared to last week's beer that had like 0 IBU, zero bitterness.
Yeah.
This one I'm like, oh yeah, it's definitely bitter, but that could partially be due to the rye. Mm-hmm. So, but it's like, it's pretty good. I'll read the back.
Ooh, a reading, if you will.
Oh, I don't know if this describes the beer, but they have like a motorcycle on the back called the Halewood motorcycle. Discovered in a rundown garage in Oxford, the Halewood motorcycle was a part of a unique collection owned by the best motorcycle road racer ever. Detailed and polished, it awaits its next fearless legendary rider. So I don't know if that like
well, the name of the beer is Rowdy, right?
Yeah, maybe it sort of inspired the beer.
Maybe.
I don't know why they printed it on there, but yeah.
It does say to pair with barbecued meats and steak and spicy casserole.
Yeah, it also says solar-powered beer, so I would be interested in wondering if this brewery uses solar power as part of its...
Yeah.
Like some of its
so much going on in this
brewing process. Yeah, there's a lot of interesting stuff. So, but it's a DC beer, so it's as close to local as I think we're going to get.
Well, yeah.
In a lot of ways. It's about as local as Richmond, as anything Richmond. So.
Yep.
Yeah, it's good. What are your impressions of it?
I like it. And you can replace the maltiness that we've been having lately with all of the feast beers and the Oktoberfests and pumpkin ales with rye.
Yeah.
And so I like the swap out. It's a different taste profile entirely.
Yeah.
So it's way less sweet.
Mm-hmm.
And it has like almost the bitter taste that you were talking about.
Yeah, it's
without
dry,
being hoppy.
It's bitter, but it's also darker than some of the stuff we've been having over the summer. So it's definitely, it still feels like a fall beer to me.
It does.
I think it works really well because it's strong. You get that alcohol on the finish.
Yeah, it's got a boozy taste to it.
Yeah,
almost like it's finished in a barrel, but it's not barrel aged.
It's not barrel aged. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, yeah, I like it. So it's Atlas Rowdy. Just saying that again in case that was unclear by my original. Yeah. When I was reaching for the can to try to say, what are we drinking tonight? So, yeah.
Fun fact, they exploded on us when we opened them.
They did. So I don't know if there was something about the beer, inherently about the beer itself, or if I just drive like a maniac.
I'm going to go with the latter.
Both of those are entirely possible.
Yep.
Any news, any updates, anything going on
in
the world, the gaming industry? Again, still isn't BlizzCon yet. That's happening this weekend for us at our time.
I was joking about making this an ongoing
joke.
Thing.
It's been like 3. I felt like it was so close to BlizzCon since we did the Blizzard episode, the bonus episode.
Yeah.
But yeah, we've said this like three weeks in a row now at this point. So I guess that's how time works. So hopefully you'll hear a bonus episode from us soon. Actually, you know what? Probably by the time this airs,
you'll have already heard it.
You may have already heard it. Yeah, exactly.
We record so far out.
So in that regard, we'll not say anything about it, so we won't repeat any points.
I do have a piece of news.
Yeah.
And have you heard about Xbox All Access?
Yeah, I still heard about the upgrade plan you can get for the Scarlet.
All right, so they announced, this is a follow-on, I imagine. If you remember, we talked about it on the show months ago. There was an exclusive deal through the Microsoft physical stores where you could pay a monthly price for 2 years, and they would provide you Game Pass and an Xbox. And that kind of like fizzled out, and it was quiet. I don't know if the deal ever went away. Well, just over the last couple of days, Microsoft unveiled Xbox All Access, in which Amazon is now the retailer for, which is huge. And what this means is they provide you an Xbox One console, access to Microsoft's Game Pass Ultimate, And Game Pass Ultimate includes, this is where we get like the hierarchy, right?
Yeah.
So you get an Xbox console and you get access to Game Pass Ultimate. Game Pass Ultimate is a combination of Xbox Live Gold, Game Pass PC, and the Game Pass for Xbox.
Mm-hmm.
So you get all three of those subscriptions rolled into one thing called Game Pass Ultimate.
Yeah.
Okay. And you get an access to the console. They ship you the console itself. So here's the deal. You can choose between three consoles. You can do the best one, which is the Microsoft Xbox One X.
Yep.
You can do the Xbox One S,
Mm-hmm.
or you can do the Xbox One S all digital.
Yeah.
And of those three, there's three pricing tiers. So here's the deal. You sign up, you agree for 24 months. You're going to pay a monthly fee, a standard rate, no interest, no fees, nothing else.
Yep.
And they ship you everything you need to get started. This is genius. PlayStation needs to jump on this. This is amazing.
It's like
And it's
we
extremely
talked about
compelling.
it before, and it's basically a cell phone plan for your game console.
And you own it. It's yours.
Sure.
Except
You're
for the
just
upgrade. That's a
leasing it,
caveat.
essentially. Yeah. Uh-huh.
We'll talk about that in a sec. So the Xbox One X is $30.99 a month
Yeah.
for 2 years. Normally, in their normal stuff,
Yeah.
it's an 18-month upgrade window,
Mm-hmm.
whatever that means, because there's no upgrade in the works, right?
Yeah,
Until now, they're doing the promotion. The promotion is that you can now shorten that 18 months to 12 months.
Right.
So in 12 months, you can upgrade to the new Xbox Scarlet.
Right, when that comes out.
When-
in 12 months, conviently.
Right.
So
How
if
about
you
that?
get on the All Access now, when the Scarlet comes out, you'll be able to upgrade, or 12 months after you make 12 payments, you can upgrade. Is it an increased price?
That was the part that was hard to find. And I'm like digging through their FAQ. And interestingly enough, when you do upgrade, you have to send your console back with everything it came with.
Yeah, that
And
makes
that's
sense.
in the fine print.
Is it when you? I'm assuming it's when you upgrade after 12 months of already having it, right?
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Which is weird because they don't treat their consoles nicely. So like Xbox or Microsoft just gets this influx of these nasty consoles of like used up controllers and stuff. I'm trying to find what do I need in order to upgrade to the next Xbox One console. So it goes through a company, the financing goes through a company called Citizens One. And it's like no interest and stuff, no fees,
Sure.
whatever. So your Citizens One account must be in good standing, and you will need to trade in all products, including your original Xbox All Access purchase, including the Xbox One console, controller, and power cord at time of upgrade. Products need to be in good condition. For more
That makes
information,
sense. There you go.
please see All Access terms.
Yeah, it's probably got to be in working condition and not with like any major damage, cosmetic damage to the box, like major cosmetic damage. I'm sure they accept like scratches and stuff, but if you like spilled wine on it and it's like sticky, then they'll probably not upgrade you. They'll probably send, I would imagine they send it back. Do you have a price?
You may upgrade from Xbox One X, Xbox One S, and Xbox One S All Digital editions to the next Xbox console. Upgrading from Xbox One S All Digital, that's the cheapest one, will require payment of an upgrade fee, which is currently $20, subject to change. Upgrading from an Xbox One X and an Xbox One S do not require payment of an upgrade
Okay,
fee.
that makes sense.
So I imagine it resets from the 12 months to the 24. Again, like you reset that.
Yeah.
You send it all back and then you have to pay, for another year.
Yeah, cool.
So I did the math. You actually do save $16 if you were to price everything out like separately and not do this subscription thing. It's $16 more expensive. So if you want a discount, get the Xbox One X, all access to Game Pass Ultimate, $31 a month for 24 months. $16 cheaper than if you just bought it all up
That's
front.
not bad. $31, that's like less than a game.
So in comparison, this is my thoughts. This is Termite's idea. I was done with PlayStation Vue. That's the TV
hey,
service.
Speaking of which, sorry,
I know, yeah,
as a side
that's
note,
another piece of news.
they canceled
Yeah, they're
PlayStation
shutting
Vue.
it down.
They're shutting it down because there's too much pay TV in the competitive space. So
Yeah.
I think it's smart. They said they're going to focus in on just making good games,
Yeah.
making it being a game platform.
I think it's a good
that's
idea.
Smart.
But as
agree.
a subscriber of PlayStation Vue for the last year and a half or so, I used it to watch all of
Oh,
our...
did you?
Yeah.
Were you on PlayStation
I'm on
Vue?
it now.
Whoops.
Right? Yeah, and I'm fine with it being canceled because I was about to cancel it myself.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah.
But compared to this Xbox All Access, I was paying $50 a month for TV.
yeah.
And we don't watch live TV ever.
Right.
And we got Hulu through my wife. So
Oh,
in
perfect.
school
There you
discount. And so whatever we wanted to watch is now on Hulu. And we've actually tested this for the last month. We acted like we didn't have PlayStation Vue.
Yeah.
And so a savings of $50 a month of not paying for that anymore. I'm very compelled to get
Yeah.
an Xbox One X right now for $31 a month, and just like, okay, I
What are you
still
gonna do with
savings.
your actual Xbox? You gonna loan it to Penguin? And
I'm gonna put it in the archive with the rest of my Xboxes.
you're gonna
You
loan
know what
it
I mean?
to Penguin? Let him have get on some of that Xbox goodness.
Get on that
Play
Sunset
games.
Overdrive.
We can play some Halo together.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I don't have a copy of Halo physically. I have it
lame.
digitally. Yeah, but I'll have Game Pass.
Cool.
But anyway,
Well, that's
I
awesome.
was thinking about it all, but
Yeah.
it's a good piece of news. It's an amazing deal for anyone who's. It's the single most compelling thing that I've had since to jump from PlayStation.
Yeah.
I'm not going to jump from PlayStation.
No,
I'm
no,
sorry.
no,
I'm
but
nested
it
in.
is definitely.
But this is the first time I took a pause and was like,
Xbox is doing something right. Yes, Penguin and Termite
Huh.
think that what Microsoft's doing with the All Access is a very good move. So if you are interested in, if you're like, I want an Xbox, but I don't really want to drop $500 on another console, this is the way to do it.
Yep,
so this
absolutely.
is a way to do it, at least.
yeah.
All right,
So that's it. That's all the news I got.
The only other piece of news I wanted to talk about
Oh,
briefly
you got one
about
more?
was
Okay.
did you see the trailer for The Mandalorian?
Nope. I saw that it dropped today, but I haven't watched it yet.
It looks really good.
'Cause I
It
haven't really
looks
had
like a
access
Star
to-
Wars movie.
Yeah?
Like it looks as good or better than Solo.
Well, good thing I have 3 years of Disney Plus already paid for, ready to go.
Fantastic.
It was
Good for
$4
you.
a
I'm
month.
going to come over and watch some Mandalorian.
So there was this deal for the D23 members
Yeah.
where you could lock in 3 years of payments at $4 a month, which
Oh,
is
nice,
way
yeah.
cheaper than you can get
That's
anywhere
amazing,
else.
yeah.
But I wasn't a D23 member, so I became a D23 member for free. Because you could
Nice.
set up a free account,
Yeah,
and then
yeah, yeah.
that was your offer on your
Yeah,
account, and
yeah.
then signed up for it. So I'm good to go. I'm ready to rock.
Sweet.
November
I'm going to come
12th.
over. We're going to watch some Mandalorian.
Yeah, it's gonna be awesome. So I'm really excited.
Yeah, I mean, you should watch the trailer, dude. It looks like a Star Wars. It's the same. They said, I think I read somewhere that it was $15 million per episode for them to make.
Jeez.
So the production value is just like, it's basically
So
Star
I
Wars movie
wonder
quality.
if the philosophy that Disney follows, that they have to have at least a 2-to-1 return on all of this stuff that they produce, or it's not worth producing, is true. How many episodes is Mandalorian?
I don't know.
They didn't announce that?
They did, I don't know. Not that they didn't announce it, but I just don't know. So,
Okay.
but given if they're competing with like, if they're following the Netflix model, I would imagine it'd be like 8 to 10 episodes.
So $150 million in budget. So just to make the money back on that show, it needs to be at least $300 million in subscribers. They got that.
Yeah,
They
easy.
got that. Yeah.
yeah, for
It's
sure.
like the entire population of the United States
Yeah.
subscribes to that, and they got it.
Yeah.
That-
The only other Star Wars news was that that I saw that's kind of we're hitting a lot of the same beats with this piece of news as the last about the Mandalorian.
Yeah.
The creators of Game of Thrones had signed on with Disney to do a Star Wars movie or trilogy. I don't know exactly what it was,
Didn't
but they're
that
set to
just
do.
get panned?
They left the project.
Okay.
I would assume the entire project got panned, so they
Gotcha.
left.
Okay.
The
That was the
project,
news, though,
which
right?
I think is fantastic news because
Yeah.
I was very displeased with the way they ended Game of Thrones and the way that they did Game of Thrones after they ran out of source material.
But what was the best part?
But they had a $200 million deal with Netflix. That's why I said it hits on the
I
same
see.
beat. So they're
Yeah.
making a show for Netflix, and they left the Disney stuff behind. I'm like, leaving Star Wars for even a $200 million sounds great, but nowhere did I see what they would have potentially made from a Star Wars movie with Disney, you know?
Yeah.
I don't know. So
What was the best season of Game of Thrones?
probably season 1.
The beginning,
I think so. I think it's got
So
season
if-
1 or the season with the Red Wedding.
which was 2 or 3?
Three, it was three, yeah.
So right in the middle, even better. So if they were to make a new Star Wars trilogy, they wouldn't be bound by anything, and they would be starting something new all to themselves and finishing it all to themselves.
Yeah,
I
so
think they could do a great job.
When they make
doing
stuff
that.
up, it's bad.
Oh, yeah, you got
That's
a
what I
point.
mean.
I
It's
see.
like when they had source material to work with, it was
Right.
amazing. They did fine adapting source material. When they started having
Yeah.
to make up their own story beats, suddenly they started justifying things like, well, you know, this character sort of forgot about
Yeah.
this other character, and so she lost a dragon. Like, are you kidding me?
But they were bound by the foundation of what the story was based on the books. So they really weren't operating freely. You know, like they had to
Yeah.
finish the things that were bound to the books.
Yeah, they had an outline that they were trying to
Yeah.
follow, and they had to try to make sense of plot points, but they had to do so based on decisions they made. I still think they're bad storytellers, and I don't want them making Star Wars. I don't want them making Star Wars, okay? So,
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought
Well,
it
I
was
mean, J.J. Abrams did after Lost. How's he doing?
he's fine.
But Lost was terrible.
Lost, he left Lost by the time it got terrible.
Oh, is that what it was?
I actually like some of J.J. Abrams' other work, though.
So convenient for
I
your
know, yeah,
argument.
it's totally. I love convenient arguments for me. Well, speaking of convenient arguments, that leads us into our next segment, which is doing this podcast is our favorite thing. Woo, doing this podcast is our favorite thing. Favorite things. It doesn't have anything to do with convenient arguments. I just use that as a convenient segue.
Yep.
Favorite things is a segment of our show where we just sort of let you in on what makes us happy this week. And I guess it doesn't have to necessarily be happy, but something that we're totally into this week. Mm-hmm. In hopes that you might find your next favorite thing if you consider this each of our recommendations for the week of something, anything. Mm-hmm. So mine is my brother-in-law is living with us, or my brother-in-law and sister-in-law are living with us, and my niece. They're temporarily moving in with us while they're looking for a home. And since they just got a job in the area and had to move from Asheville, North Carolina, this is probably the third time I've said this, but we'll say it anyways for context.
It's Brizzle McFizzle.
Brizzle McFizzle, yep.
Check her out on Twitter.
So my niece's birthday was this past weekend, so we celebrated her third birthday. So happy birthday, Emmeline! And
happy birthday!
My brother-in-law got cupcakes from Carytown Cupcakes in Richmond.
Legendary.
They were Harry Potter themed for the month of October. And they were so good. There was a sorting hat cupcake that was filled. On the outside, it was just a chocolate cupcake with a little swirl of cream to look like the hat. Yeah. And on the inside was a different color cream. Mm-hmm. So you don't know which one. So the idea is they gave us 4 of them, and there was 4 of us. So we each took a bite and got quote sorted. I got Hufflepuff.
Yes. Yes, the best house, the only house.
I am actually
no one else
a
matters.
Gryffindor, guys. So, but then they have butterbeer flavored cupcakes. They had one cupcake that was creme brulee on the top with a custard filling. Ooh. It was the best stinking. That
sounds
cupcake
like
I've ever had.
Hufflepuff too.
It wasn't a sorted one, but so Carytown Cupcakes are in Richmond in Carytown. And it's so if you are a Richmond local and haven't had them, they're hella expensive, but they're worth it. They're really good.
Worth it.
Yep, totally. So that's my favorite thing.
Oh, that's not it.
I wonder how
too early.
No, too early. I am curious. I would love to have someone who actually cares go listen back to all of our episodes and report back to me how many times my favorite thing was about food.
And you can do that at 80bitpodsmash.com. That's our landing website where we have links to all of our stuff, all of our podcast platforms, Google Play, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, and Spotify. Most importantly, Spotify. That seems to be an extremely popular platform. Everyone loves Spotify.
Yeah,
so
super convenient.
You can find our podcast there. You can respond. You can insert your thoughts, comments, questions, concerns, feedback. And all of our
weird, interesting stats that you've gone back through and discovered.
You can let us know on Reddit, on Discord, on Facebook, or Instagram, or Twitter.
Or email.
And everything across the board is 80BIT Podsmash. Mm-hmm.
So, what's your favorite thing?
Except for our Discord. Oh, yeah, that's right. Our Discord channel, the link is in every single one of the show notes.
Yeah.
And it's usually posted on Facebook. And sometimes if I have enough characters, I can get it in on a Twitter tweet.
Nice.
But sometimes it's not. So if you want to find us on Discord, search out the Facebook posts or look at the show notes. Mm-hmm. Okay. So, Termite's favorite thing. I'm torn.
Oh.
Between 2 things. I got a platinum trophy, and I started a good game close to Halloween.
Pull a penguin and do both.
I have 2.
I have 2 this week.
I've mentioned on the podcast that I started playing the Mega Man X Legacy Collection.
Yep.
Which started as I'm just going to play this with my son so he can watch robots and have fun and I can interact with him and I just play a game when they're awake and around. Because I'm primarily playing Borderlands 3, I couldn't play that around my kids, but I still wanted to play some games with them.
Can't play your other game around them either.
I'm going to talk about that in a minute. And so I had nothing else to play that I was currently playing. It's not on the backlog, except for this. It was $20 at GameStop, and I went impulsively and I bought it. Mega Man X Legacy Collection 1 and 2. I played through the first one. Eventually, it got its hooks in me so hard that I was playing it after the kids went to bed, and I platinumed it.
Yay!
So platinum number 21 was the Mega Man X Legacy Collection. It's quite easier than I thought it would be.
Platinums can now drink beer with us.
They can. Look at that.
There's 21 of them.
And so it was a good platinum. I loved the trophy list. It wasn't too much grinding. It wasn't too much difficulty. The first 3 Mega Man X games that existed on the Super Nintendo originally have a password system that is fully emulated, so you can generate passwords to get you to any point in the game. So I did jump through some trophy grinding hoops by setting a password and running through a certain spot of the game, and then like using a different one. You can change the difficulty levels on the fly, and so you're turning off rookie mode and not at the same time. Mega Man X4 was a PlayStation 1 game originally, and so that doesn't have the password system, so it required a little bit more work. But great platinum, super, super fun if you're into Mega Man X at all. I highly recommend it. It did not take that long, probably 15 hours. And I'd give it like a 5 out of 10 difficulty. Cool. So it was fun. And my other favorite thing, by your recommendation, was to, as it approaches Halloween, it's not Halloween yet. The night that we're recording this is 2 days away.
Boom, spooky.
I decided I wanted to play something scary, so I fired up Resident Evil 2 Remake.
Hello.
Finally. And the game is absolutely amazing, as it was already my favorite Resident Evil. I am now in nostalgic heaven. It's completely remade to be modern. It's absolutely incredible.
That game will go down as... I will always remember it as the game that I was playing Resident Evil 2 when my wife's water broke. And I had to go to the hospital with her. So it is both my water breaking story game and also the game that I was playing when right after my son was born on my paternity leave. So
the psychological horror that is, I want to say it's inspired by PT. It feels like there's a little bit of it gets in your head.
Yeah, I can see that vibe.
And it's not only because of what the game, it has a little bit of jump scares. It's not that. It's the atmosphere. It's the music. It's the pacing of the game, and we've talked on this before, where they provide you weapons and ammo, and you're like, sweet, I can get through zombies, but then they don't provide you enough.
Right,
so
a lot of scary games lose a lot of the fear factor due to the fact that you have plenty of, you have guns and weapons and a way to fight back. And for me at least, I'm like, cool, my fight response kicks in. When you're playing a game that tries to trigger your fight and flight response, you want people's flight response to be triggered.
Right.
But my fight response is kicking. I'm like, yeah, I'll kill him. But Resident Evil hijacks that even further. It's like you have weapons, but you have such limited ammo that becomes a metagame in and of itself, where you're like,
that's what I'm at right now. I'm completely out of ammo and I'm stuck. So I'm running around the mansion. Well, it's actually the police station. I'm running around trying to figure out what to do with a red ruby gem. And I have no clue what's going on. It's the one thing left. Yeah. And I've exhausted everything, and I've hit dead ends everywhere. So we'll see what happens. I'm trying not to look anything up.
Fun.
I'm also not trying to do a trophy run at all. So no trophy guides. I'm just going to play the game from beginning to end, and I want to play.
To do trophies for that, you have to basically speed run it, because you have to get S ranks
on the hardest
which is
difficulty.
All time
based.
Yeah,
it's nuts. Yeah. So I'm not doing any of that. But anyway, that's my favorite thing.
Sweet, awesome. We can move on to our next segment, which is DLC. Downloadable content is a segment of our show where we have a little discussion that you normally wouldn't have about video games. It's in addition to our main topic, and sometimes, on a very, very rare blue moon, it might actually be related to our topic.
Blue moon's a type of beer.
It's not actually that kind of rare. Do you actually know what a blue moon is?
I did.
A blue moon, by definition of what a blue moon is when you get a second full moon in the same month. It only happens once a year, because it's just like when you have a particularly long month and you had a full moon at the beginning of the month, and then enough time passes that you get a second full moon that month. It's called blue moon.
It's like when we get 3 paychecks in 1 month.
Exactly. It's fantastic. Yeah, it's just nature's third paycheck.
Yay.
Well, cool. The DLC I have today is you're going to pick a popular game or franchise. Go.
Metal Gear Solid.
Metal Gear Solid. Okay, so my DLC today, there's an alternate universe out there where Metal Gear Solid just never gained traction and was basically an indie game. What does Metal Gear Solid look like without any mainstream appeal? It's just a sort of a side project kind of. It's got a cult following, but it does not have mainstream appeal.
Just Metal Gear Solid 1.
Just Metal Gear Solid 1.
Exactly the way that it is.
Say that a Metal Gear Solid 2 comes out. A sequel to it comes out because it had enough of a following to get a sequel, but it was never the franchise. It's never going to get multiple sequels and spin-offs. Yeah. It's just... What does it look like? What does the game
Metal Gear Solid 2 was a throwback to the original Metal Gear 1, which was an 8-bit, top-down view, very isometric, restricted kind of game.
Yeah.
And super difficult. So that's what they did. Metal Gear Solid kicked off as it is, as we know it now. It was awesome. And they were like, oh, people like Metal Gear Solid. Let's do a throwback. Let's do a new story in the 8-bit retro way and make it super, super hard. Well, because of that, it never gained traction. And so it flopped. as an indie title, and we got no more sequels.
Mm.
So no Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater, no Metal Gear Solid 4, no Metal Gear Solid 5.
Does it keep its identity as sort of a stealth?
Metal Gear Solid 1 will go down in infamy as like Splinter Cell is now, or SOCOM, or Siphon Filter.
Okay.
Like those games that are just
kind of a one-off good stealth game. None of that
all those
crazy
games had
elaborate.
sequels. Right.
Does it have? This is also, we're still talking an alternate universe,
right?
World, so it's not, doesn't have any of that crazy lore storytelling. It's just a standalone kind of stealth-based military shooter.
They tried to get that lore off the ground.
They kind of laid hints for it, but it never really.
But that's what happened.
They couldn't flesh it out.
They went retro to try and appeal to the original people, and it didn't work in the current audience that it came out in, which was like 2002.
Cool.
When that game launched.
Awesome.
So.
Yeah. All right, that's DLC for you. That's
that
the alternate
quick.
world where it's not mainstream. Well, we are already 25 minutes in, so
I guess it was aptly timed.
I mean, we could have done another one, but it was a simpler one than I thought. But
yeah,
oh well. All right, cool. So we're talking about mainstream appeal and what effect it has on games. The inspiration for this topic we'll link in our show notes alongside our Discord link. It was a Cracked article from a few years back. We've actually had this on our topic list for a while and just haven't hit on it. So we're kind of dragging it up from the bottom of the list there. Yeah. But the topic, or the blog post, was called "So Your Favorite Thing Went Mainstream and You Hate It." It's a good article written by a guy named Daniel Dockery. I like his writing. It's really short, so it's really quick read. And it's an interesting opinion piece. So we're going to sort of spark the idea for this topic, and we're going to kind of dissect that idea a little bit further. He specifically talks about video games. He talks about Pokemon and Dark Souls primarily in that game, or that article.
Yep.
And he comes right out of the gate. I wanted to talk about. So I wanted to use that as a jumping point and just sort of talk first about what do we mean by the word mainstream? What does the word mainstream mean?
So I will best describe what this means through an example.
Sure.
Way back in like the year 2000, there was a World War II first-person shooter known as Call of Duty. It came out to a good campaign that was kind of a retelling, a most historically accurate version of World War II. And as the player, you would progress through like the beaches of Normandy, and you would progress through some various battles and skirmishes and things that happened. Fast forward to today, and that is a completely annualized franchise that tops the top 10 charts every single year.
Was it originally?
Constantly.
Do you remember who developed it originally?
I don't know.
And do you know if it was published by Activision back then?
I don't think so.
Interesting. Okay, so it was this. I mean, it was the Wild West of the 2000s.
That's
so
a good. Let's just Google that because it's a good.
While you're talking about that, yeah, I would say mainstream is when anything. I mean, it really just kind of is synonymous with sort of popularity. It usually is applied when something starts off in relative obscurity and then becomes so popular enough that it becomes its own. It becomes a franchise, essentially. It becomes its own. It takes on a life of its own. Usually, it becomes kind of a cash cow for the people who own it. So, it's, you see this term applied in greater cultural contexts. You see it applied to music a lot. This band was super indie, punk rock, whatever, or this band or this rapper was relatively unknown, gained a kind of popular cult following, and then eventually it got picked up by radio stations or whatever and blew up and it went mainstream. I guess they used to call it selling out back in the 80s and 70s. Now mainstream is kind of the term.
And the term is even used in craft beer.
It is, yeah.
It's like InBev is the giant conglomerate.
Brewery, I can imagine.
And breweries will, quote, sell out to Anheuser-Busch and the InBev distribution. And there's all this complication about, well, they're not actually producing beer on their standards, they're just using them to distribute across the country, etc. You get into all these different political
There's
games
and
stuff.
tons of famous examples and all kinds of entertainment. D&D is now mainstream. Comic books used to be something.
And look at the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
And they became mainstream. Video games themselves as a whole, as an entertainment medium, used to be considered not mainstream, and now they are mainstream.
Kind of the reason we started this podcast, to look at that.
It's not necessarily a bad thing, even though it's often used negatively it's wielded negatively by people. So I wanted to hit some other terms that we're going to be talking about
first.
But first,
Call of Duty.
Sorry. Yes, back to that. Sorry,
Published by Activision,
it
developed
was public by Activision.
by Infinity Ward in 2003,
Okay, so
October
they were the
29th,
OG.
which is today.
What?
So we're on the 16th anniversary of the original Call of Duty.
That's kind of crazy.
It was developed on id Tech 3, so the
Whoa.
Quake 3 engine,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
I actually remember playing. That was the first installment, and it took off. Like, popularity-wise, it went crazy.
Yeah, so it kind of gained. It wasn't really obscure. It gained mainstream appeal to begin with, and then kind of took off. I would argue.
I don't know if it came out, if its reception was good right off the bat. I think it took a little while, and I'm looking up the reception here. It got a 91 on Metacritic, so it reviewed very well when it came out, and it was the 6th best computer game of 2003. So I mean, it wasn't like top dog, but it did rate very well.
Yeah.
And it sold 790,000 copies, and it earned $29.6 million by 2006.
Yeah.
So not the crazy stuff we see today at all, but it was enough to spawn a sequel.
Yeah.
Like it was that's how mainstream.
And then
it's a good segue,
yeah,
right?
so-
How does it happen?
Yeah.
You did have the little categories here, which I do want to get it. Do you have a question about how does a game get mainstream?
No, not really. So you can just
Sure.
talk
So
about it.
like, to get a game to be mainstream, it almost implies that you're going to have a sequel or establish a franchise. And so, like, with the original Call of Duty as an example, and walking through that, it made enough money to fund the next game, right? So that was like, the risk was now low enough that Activision would publish a second one.
Yeah.
And it turned into a bigger and bigger, like, it just snowballed. It continued to succeed. And then now we have like a list of developers that are in rotation that publish Call of Duty games every single year. And you normally wouldn't be able to create a new game from scratch within 1 year. It takes 3 to 5 years to kind of cycle those through. But that's what else garnishes mainstream appeal, right? So it's like, how can we grow our audience? You want to answer that as a developer or as a publisher. It's like, how can we expand the game? What can we do to appeal to more people? And so you're going to make compromises or innovations, however you look at it. I like the word making innovations because sometimes you are thinking outside the box to appeal to a different style of gamer, but sometimes you're making compromises too to make it more appealing for more people, which is where the negative connotation kind of comes in. So you're iterating on the game, which is what feeds back into our topic from last week, iteration versus innovation.
Innovation, yeah. But iteration works actually too.
Right,
so.
yeah. Versus stagnation. Do you produce the same thing again with a little bit more polish, or do you innovate and do something different, take a higher risk? That conversation goes into this. It's like, what do you want to do to make more money? So what is behind becoming mainstream? Money.
Right, but becoming, people can have, or companies and publishers can have all kinds of strategies to try to get their games to go mainstream. In many cases, by being a, quote, mainstream publisher, like EA or Activision or something like that, then any of their games would be considered mainstream from the get-go. But mainstream is also something that happens to your games. You know what I mean? Like, it's something that you can try to foster it happening, but Anthem might now forever be relegated to, even though it was made by EA and BioWare, which are two companies that you would assume their stuff is now would be mainstream.
Right.
This game might forever kind of, though it may have started as like, this is trying to garner mainstream appeal. It failed, and now it might just sort of have a cult following that keeps it alive. So we're bringing up a lot of terms here, so I want to hit on some. So in it, we've defined mainstream. It is a game that is popular and played by a lot of people, and kind of has a life of its own. Yeah.
There's maybe a quantifiable thing,
right?
Amount of money earned. Or,
it is kind of fluid though, because like I said, you could sit here and be like, is it mainstream because it's made by a mainstream publisher, or is it mainstream because it's popular in and of itself?
Right.
There's a lot of wiggle room. Yes, the answer is yes. But so I've already been throwing around terms. I want to hit cult. What do I mean by cult following?
Yeah,
cult following is kind of it's a term that is actually seen as a positive term, but like, cult hits are games that gather a following of their own, even though they haven't really made a mainstream following. They may go from having a cult following to becoming mainstream, but they haven't hit that widespread popularity, and so instead they just have a sort of group of people that can sustain it, but is not really widely recognized by the pop culture community or video game community in this case at large.
There is an article on Gama Sutra. I don't know how to pronounce it. Gama Sutra?
Gama Sutra, I guess. Yeah.
called The State of Indie Gaming, and it was written by Juan Grill. And you bring up a good point about cult following, because he actually lists, and this is kind of a fun thought experiment, this article is primarily focused on indie games, which is kind of the root of something before it becomes mainstream in our conversation. He has, what is the audience? And there's 1, 2, 3, 4 different types of gamers.
Okay.
The cult gamer, since you talked about cult following. This type of gamer is an active, hardcore gamer who is very well informed about games and trends in games, and is always looking for games that are different and not part of what the masses play. The cult gamer may also be looking for a lightweight experience for a change, and let's say Halo 3 break. Like, he's taking a break to play Halo 3, which is a mainstream game. So, like you said, it's somebody who is not mainstream, who loves and is super knowledgeable about all kinds of different types of games.
Right.
So that's the cult gamer.
Yeah. So other terms I want to hit, we've been talking about them, we've been saying them, and some of these we've hit on the podcast before, but I wanted to kind of define them in the context of mainstream. AAA games, they are games developed by, quote, AAA publishers. Usually they have lots of money invested. Right. But I wanted to bring it up because a AAA game doesn't automatically mean it's mainstream, though I would say they are more likely to become mainstream because they have bigger budgets.
Huge budgets.
The flip side of that is indie games. Indie games are usually developed by a small team of relatively unknown people. They may be funded on Kickstarter. They may be funded through Steam Greenlight program. They may even be funded by big developers, but they're relatively unknown, small teams, or even a single person. I bring up indie games because even though they are more likely to have cult followings, they are also not immune to mainstream success. So a game like Shovel Knight, for example, or was Minecraft originally a AAA game?
No.
Yeah, exactly.
Not at all.
So Minecraft,
that was one dude. That's like
Minecraft
Stardew Valley.
is incredibly.
It's a perfect example.
Perfect example of an indie game that became mainstream.
Crazy.
So, yeah, indie games just on the virtue of being indie does not necessarily make them not mainstream. So I wanted to bring that up as a thing there.
And there are mainstream publishers that will provide projects such as EA's EA Originals program, where A Way Out and what's the one with Yarny? Unravel 1 and 2.
Yeah.
Those are like, quote, indie games, but funded by EA, and that's more of like an altruistic move. It's kind of a generosity into the gaming industry thing where they provide monies for a studio to like independently go develop something, and that doesn't mean they're going to be AAA, right? Because those games aren't, and it doesn't mean they're going to be mainstream. Exactly, that's debatable whether A Way Out and Unravel are mainstream, right?
Yep. So, and then I also wanted to hit hardcore and casual. It's going to probably come up in this conversation as well. We've talked about hardcore and casual before, and
had a whole episode about it.
We had a whole episode about it, exactly. So you go into more depth there. But again, I wanted to sort of, in the context of mainstream games, we'll be throwing around these terms because we're going to be talking about a game like Dark Souls, and we'll be talking about how that game went from being a relatively unknown franchise to becoming one of the most popular franchises, and a lot of the development questions that come about now that it has achieved mainstream success. So we'll talk about that more, but if we bring up hardcore simply means people who want a challenge, people who want a really, a game they can really sink their teeth into and get into all the nitty gritty, and usually they have a lot of time they can devote to games, and they really become immersed, and they like the really difficult time-consuming aspects of it, whereas casual players are usually seen as people who just want to have a good time. They want to be able to kind of turn a game on, turn their brain off, and they want to be able to have the option of just sort of playing through the game on like a story mode or something where it's easy, or they just want to be able to kind of consume the game in small chunks, as opposed to like just digging in for hours. So
here is Gama Sutra's definition of casual gamer.
Okay, go ahead.
This is pretty like not pretty. I don't know. It almost has a very negative connotation, but I don't want to.
Well, depending on whether you're hardcore or casual, you're going to have a different perception. This
obviously shows the artist or the writer's bias here. But the casual video gamer, this type of gamer plays games on the web and maybe some downloads on PC or console. His or her first exposure to video games was when she was young, so it differentiates from the solitaire, bejeweled, Diner Dash, mystery case files type of player, and that the latter, in general, has started playing games in the late 90s or later. Okay, so it's not as condemning as I thought.
Right, yeah.
But
it is so that brings me to the last term I wanted to find, and I only bring it up because it's used in the article that we're linking off to, but I think it will also apply to our conversation as well. But there's a term called gatekeepers, and this isn't just related to video gamers, like hardcore and casual tend to be. Gatekeeper can be any interest or any form of entertainment or any culture, subculture, community. Any community at large can have a quote gatekeeper, and gatekeepers, what they are is it's a personality that says like, well, I have been into games since the early 90s, and I played this game back when it was actually hard and actually good, so my opinion somehow matters more than someone who's just picking it up or someone who just wants. So that's what a gatekeeper is. They're seen as people in the community who say your voice and your opinions don't matter, and I'm going to try to silence you because I have been involved in this thing longer or more so than you. So in the so gatekeepers, again, they don't necessarily have to be negative because there are some, but they tend to be seen as negative because like who are you? You're just because you watched Buffy the Vampire Slayer when it was on TV doesn't mean you're a better fan. You know what I mean? Like by someone who just discovered it the other day, you know what I mean? And just got into it. So, it's definitely usually used negatively. So in the article, he says, he's like, I don't like gatekeepers, but I'm going to defend them. Temporarily. So that leads us into this, I think that finally leads us into the segue where we can stop defining terminology and actually talk about, so gatekeepers, might say, and he used the example of Pokemon, where he says, Pokemon used to be this game that was challenging. You had to individually level up each Pokemon. That took time, that took effort, but, it rewarded the people who really dug in and understood. It rewarded the, quote, hardcore players.
Right.
In later iterations, they kind of watered down those aspects of it by making it so you could level up all your Pokemon at the same time, and you didn't really need to invest as much time researching all the stats and moves and best combinations and stuff like that.
Through it, right.
They made it a little bit easier and more, quote, accessible to, quote, casuals.
Right.
So the argument that he makes in the article is that, quote unquote, ruined the game experience, that ruined the franchise because it took something that was complicated and interesting and made it worse. So I wanted to start and say, is that a valid criticism of mainstream appeal? Like, what can mainstream appeal bring to games and franchises, and what can mainstream appeal take away from? So what are the advantages, disadvantages, pros, cons, dangers, or dangers or benefits?
Yeah.
So we'll kind of talk about both, and that will kind of make the meat of the rest of our conversation.
I'm guessing that I fall under that personality of gatekeeper that's not opinionated. And it's actually linking off to the Gama Sutra types of gamers again. We are kind of the gatekeepers. I think they fit into this. Whether they're negative or positive or not, I think they fit into this category, and that's the game industry professional or academic gamer.
Yeah.
And it sounds like a bigger title than it is, but some of us reading this article and the smallest portion of the audience, game professionals or academics, need to be very impressed by the gameplay of a game in order to add it to their roster. If that's true, we are the hardcore version of a cult gamer. And I feel like the description of how the author of the Cracked article, what was his name?
Daniel Dockery. He's another Daniel.
Hey, Daniel Dockery. I feel like that's him, and in his response to the Pokemon feedback, how he felt that Pokemon Red and Blue, the original ones being hard and slow, and versus X and Y, where they've kind of dumbed it down.
Yeah.
Where was I going with that? Red and Blue were the first iterations of Pokemon, period, and he, with the world, experienced those as they were new. And they were the way they were because they were the way they were, and
and people liked them for what they were.
Right.
Exactly, people liked them for the fact that they were what they were. Complicated RPGs, relatively complicated RPGs.
And it was a buggy mess, and there wasn't a cleaned up, optimized competitive scene where everything's balanced, and there's all these values behind the scenes where you can train your Pokemon and breed them. Those systems just didn't exist. So this is where I was getting at. So with X and Y, the one he's complaining about, where they added things like the experience share, which gives experience to your entire party of 6 Pokemon instead of just the one that's in the front, or the ones that participate in battle split. Those systems may have been simpled or brought down, but then the competitive scene ramped up.
Right.
And
yeah.
so with that, you have the stuff the hardcore gamer would like.
Yep.
And that is the hidden EV, IV values that are behind the scenes, the breeding, the nature of every Pokemon, whether they're angry or happy or sad or depressed, etc. There's they affect the stats and how they grow. So when you have multiple level 100, say Charizards, they're all different because they have different natures and they have different hidden values. So there is a system in place that they've made a little bit more accessible, but still ridiculously hard. Plus the whole shiny thing where you have like a 1 in 100th chance of finding a shiny at any given time. And it's super, super hard. 1 in 1,000, I think. I don't even know the odds. It's nuts. It's super, super hard. So I think when you look at that example, here's an innovation. We want to appeal. Right. We want to appeal to mainstream, so we need to dumb these things, quote unquote, dumb this down, or at least make this a little bit more appealing to casual gamers who don't have as much time to sink into this, or who might be overwhelmed. I think that is amazing. I think the more people playing video games, the better we are as a society. So I'm like, yes, Nintendo, do that. Like, make these pain points, these quality of life things, like the experience share. Let's do that, but then don't forget the hardcore gamer. So I think Nintendo is actually like good. This is a good example of doing both. And we wouldn't have the competitive scene of Pokemon today if it wasn't for the mainstream appeal. And so now you have an entire esports regime. Like the Pokemon World Championships just happened like 2 weeks ago. You have that. That exists. That's a thing. And that's kind of mainstream because there's sponsors and there's esports athletes.
I mean, Pokemon is the most mainstream. It's like the biggest. It is the single biggest franchise. I think I read today that Pokemon is the biggest single franchise of anything in the world.
There you go. And you can't get any more mainstream than that.
You can't get any more mainstream than that.
Right?
Everybody loves Pokemon.
And there's a super hardcore thing involved. If you're in that, you can do it. You'll have your attention. It'll give you what you want out of it. And if you're super casual like myself, who just wants to play through the stories of all the main games and not have to worry about collecting everything, it's there and it makes it easy. Like I said, the pain points are removed. So all of that to say, this is a perfect example of both the pain points of going mainstream, where some people can be offended, but also the innovations that allow the future of the franchise to continue to evolve.
Yeah, I was gonna
pun intended.
You've hit on a few things, and I think that I'll kind of reiterate some of your points, but I'll break it down this way. So I'll first talk about benefits. On the one hand, you have the benefits of going mainstream are there's more money to go into the franchise, so there's more development resources. There's more. You can do more things. You can literally, and so that facilitates innovation, which is kind of what you're talking about. So, and so if developers take that opportunity to say, hey, how can we just beef this game up? Not only can we make more quality of life improvements for the pain points, but also we can still flesh this out deeper and add more depth for the people who want that. So they can, if they do it right and do it well, they can actually sort of have their cake and eat it too. Mainstream appeal brings more attention to a game. It can add longevity to a franchise. So you can have, Breath of the Wild because Zelda's went mainstream 25 years ago or whatever,
Probably with Link to the Past.
Yeah. So
maybe when that hit.
Yeah, probably. So there's more resources, there's more opportunities, and there's more overall support for your game. So it adds longevity to a franchise and it adds resources. Those same points, though, can also be seen as dangers because when you have more money in something, you have more chance for money to be the main focus. So I can see the argument being, well, once a game's gone mainstream, and really one of the arguments that people make about anything going mainstream is, well, now you've sold out.
Right.
Now it's more to you about the dollar than it is about the actual art. So I can see the argument being, well, these games have less artistic merit because they stopped caring about the actual art of making the game and they cared more about the dollar. I don't think that's a criticism that can be applied universally, right? But I think there are plenty of examples of that actually happening. So, whereas like LucasArts, was it LucasArts?
It was.
Yeah, where LucasArts was making games because they were passionate about Star Wars and that passion came through in their games. When EA, a much more mainstream publisher, got a hold of the franchise, it became way more about capitalizing Star Wars.
The epitome of that is Star Wars Battlefront 2, where the microtransaction system completely wrecked everything about that game. Its reception, its critical reception, its commercial reception, everything. And they had to completely go back and rewrite all of the code to get rid of the the microtransactions entirely, and where it stands now is at a severely weakened state.
Yeah.
So that's a perfect negative example.
So I do think I'm more concerned about that aspect of the dangers of mainstream than I am about the actual kind of gatekeeping of this. Though I am sympathetic to the sort of gatekeeping of being like, well, this game used to be good back when they did this one specific thing. But we had brought up Dark Souls at the onset because he brings it up in his article, and I think that's another good example of a game that has gained mainstream success but hasn't caved to the demands of people who want it to be more accessible. Because
this is a great example.
Exactly.
Because you use the term accessible.
Yes, accessibility.
And I like this because accessibility implies there are, and it's kind of spearheaded by Microsoft, there are gamers who are disabled physically.
Oh, yeah.
And because of the difficulty of the game, they can't hit the buttons the way that a normal person would.
Yeah.
Be it a mental block or a physical ailment or however their handicap is, Microsoft came out with that controller, that adaptive one, where gamers were creating their own controller button combinations and their own devices that this thing can take in as input. And Sekiro Shadows Die Twice, which is the newest game
From Software Game,
that's in line with Bloodborne and the Demon Souls and Dark Souls games, has accessibility modes. And some people, there was a criticism when it came out that was like, oh, now you've added like an easy mode, you're catering to this audience and you're not staying true to your art form. The difficulty of the game is glued or married to the art, and so you're ripping that apart and you're sacrificing or compromising your art or what you're trying to do to try and appeal to more. And I think that was a crap argument. I am all for accessibility. I'm all about let's get as many gamers in that as possible, and if it means adding difficulty sliders or tweaking the experience for those who need it and make that game playable.
Right, because it's not just physical disabilities are a very important subset of people who have an interest in games and in many ways can't or are unable to, but they are by no means not the only disability that you can have. You could also have people who have mental disabilities or attention, like things like attention disabilities or just, like learning disabilities, which can impact your ability to adapt and change, gameplay and stuff like that. So yeah, there's an argument to be made that like, okay, gatekeeper person who's like, well, I can play this game, and I appreciate that it's hard and challenging. Like, okay, well, not everybody's as fortunate to have their mental and physical faculties as you are, so why not? Why should those people be unable to enjoy a game just because you have an inflated sense of ego? But then again, on the other hand, I think I might be more sympathetic to the whole idea of like, well, if the designers designed it to be this, and they, I would make the argument that in a lot of ways, the difficulty of the game is married to the art of the game because it's intricate to the design. In the same way that the timing of a movie, this actually ties into another kind of newsy thing. Apparently Netflix has been beta testing a playback speed feature, meaning you could play back their show, you could speed up the speed at which the shows are going. A lot of directors and artists are lashing out against that because they're like, when we make a movie, we time it, or a TV show, we time the moments we want because that's part of the art. You can't separate the timing of cinema is as important as the acting, the delivery of the lines, the music, and everything else that goes with it. Like the cadence of each moment.
Yeah.
So
it's like those motion TVs, those enhanced motion smoothing like TVs that make you feel like you're watching a soap opera. It's like that.
Yeah.
Like, the directors and TV show producers are all condemning those modes, and I'm with them. Like I totally hate all of that stuff.
So because of that, I can kind of understand that. Like, when you design an encounter to be difficult, and if you make it so there's no other way of doing that, that is part of your design. That is part of your intention. Yep. A game's art is not limited to just the storytelling and visuals. Yeah, the storytelling and visuals. It's also part of it is the gameplay itself. And if the gameplay includes a difficult challenge, that's part of it. So again,
the hardest part
I'm torn. So I am very torn in that particular. You
don't want to be exclusive either. You don't want to tell someone you can't experience this art because you can't move your thumb in a certain way. But it's the way it's supposed to be. It's like I guess blind people can't look at sculptures and paintings, but they can be described to them in a certain way. It's a very intricate balance.
It's a very murky, and I'm quite frankly torn on this entire conversation as to like, the Dark Souls and From Software and the accessibility and all that is one very specific example. But even going back to Pokemon, like, I'm torn. On the one hand, I'm like, should the artists feel free to make the games they want? Or, like you said, should everybody have the chance? I guess it comes down to the question of, like, does a game, like, I don't think the artistic integrity of a game is compromised by, like, it not being super popular. Like, a game could never achieve mainstream success and still be worthy of artistic merit.
Mm-hmm.
But
Hellblade's Senua's Sacrifice.
Yeah, but games aren't just art.
Right.
They're also business. You know what I mean? So they also, I'm not as sympathetic. When you apply the same arguments to music in regards to, like, people being like, man, this musician sucks now that they sold out and went mainstream. It's like, not necessarily. Plus, I'm all like, in our current society, like, they can either make money or not make money. Like, why would you not want them to be able to do what they're passionate about for the rest of their lives?
Mm-hmm.
Like, just because they sold out, like, and I don't usually see that much dip in quality when it comes to music, but I could see where people might make that argument. So I'm torn, because on the one hand, I'm like, I'm sympathetic to that, but I'm also sympathetic to the artists who need to survive. I wish the system were different. You know what I mean? Like, I wish there was a place for, there are other cultures in the past who have made, like, where the government itself sees art as valuable for society and has funded it. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So I really wish there was something like that existed.
So taxpayer dollars can make video games.
That would be great. Like, you know
I'm
what I
all
mean?
About it.
Because I just wish our culture valued, in a capitalist culture, unfortunately,
right?
Like, art is only as valuable as how much money it makes you. Whereas artists would say art is valuable apart from how much money it makes.
Right. Starving artists, they exist for a reason, right? They're doing their thing, and they're not going to sell out, quote unquote, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. They're not going to, it's more about not letting someone else dictate
what you're going to make.
What you make, how you express yourself. But sometimes that means it's never going to be attractive to the rank and file of people. Yeah. Is there still value in having art that does that? I would say yes. Mm-hmm. But so it's a great conversation, because I think it ties into a very recent topic we've had about innovation versus, like, when should games innovate? Like, when should they innovate to try to appeal to more of a mainstream crowd, is how it ties in that conversation. But this even goes back as far as our first episode of
our video games art.
Our video games art, and do they deserve to be treated as such, but do they come with the same drawbacks and whatever draw forwards, whatever the opposite of draw forwards that art should, So it is an interesting point. So that kind of ties in. Then I think that's a good segue into one of my other questions here. We only have two more questions, and both of these can be both meaty, but also I think we can make them pretty short. Mm-hmm. Who should developers make games for? If not for the mainstream crowd or for the cult following, who should developers make games for?
I think the more people playing video games, the better society is as a whole. Mm-hmm. And I think the more people experiencing your art or hearing your story or seeing your experience in life portrayed in such a way that's meaningful, that can touch someone's life, like, the more exposure, the better. And that could sound like I'm a mainstream apologist, because I want so many people to play games, but it comes from a place of, this is a super example, right? This person's been bullied and beaten and downtrodden his entire life, or her, and she finally came up and developed a game telling her story about how she was treated in school, how it's affected her now, and her psychological battles that are happening, or his. And here's a video game to show it. I want as many people as absolutely possible to experience that game. I want it on every platform. I want it everywhere, and I want it to be super accessible. So that's kind of the ideal. Mm-hmm. Now, getting there, you have different types. I don't want to squash or squander the guy or girl who wants to make a super difficult game that's for a specific audience. All of this is to say, an artist wants to make something for a reason. Mm-hmm. And there's usually a personal motivation or deeply personal emotional story, whether it's a super difficult game or whether it's accessible to everyone and it's easy. Either way, they should just be making what their heart and what they want to portray.
Yes, that's totally my point of view. I think developers should make the games they want to make. Yep. Whether they make mainstream appeal or not. And I wish, unfortunately, we don't live in that world. We don't live in that world. So much of the motivation, again, with the big publishers, the mainstream publishers, EA, Activision, you have so many business people in the hands with their hands in. I guarantee you the developers of Battlefront 2 did not want to include loot boxes in their games, and they were forced to.
Probably.
So it's like, I guarantee you that the Blizzard developers are ticked off right now that they're the publishers, the business people made them make the decisions that they made. You know what I mean? Like, or made them double down on the decisions that they made, because they now realize that the business side of their franchises are now compromising the artistic value of their games. I think Blizzard is some of the better artists, all things considered, or have been in the past, of any game makers out there, and they always provide top-notch quality to their products.
Right.
I am boycotting them because of the decisions the publishers have made. So it's just like, I wish more developers had the gumption, the backbone, or I wish there were systems in place to protect developers to allow them and enable them to make the games they want to make, not for the shareholders, not for the mainstream audience, not even necessarily for the cult following, but for themselves. Because the best art that we get is the stuff that comes from true self-expression, and true self-expression is for the self that makes it, the self that expresses it, not. And then if other people appreciate it, fantastic. More people are going to be impacted by it, in my opinion, if it comes from a true place. So that's my personal point of view, but I also understand that's also not the world we live in.
Right.
So with that in mind, with the world we live in mind, like, should developers be making games for, accessibility, or should they be targeting a specific audience? I don't really have a question for that. I can see both answers being valid, because I can see both sides of the argument. And
there are games that do both.
Yeah,
there are
absolutely.
Publishers that will publish a studio to make a game in a box, in a vacuum. I heard Naughty Dog is this.
Yeah.
Like, Sony just gives Naughty Dog money, and they go out and they make Uncharted. And it's amazing. Or they make The Last of Us, which is arguably the best video game, top 5 ever made. BioShock. It's fun to, here you go. You just go do your thing. 2K Games funded it. There you go, right? You get BioShock. So there is room for both. Sometimes it lines up, sometimes it doesn't. And we see all aspects of this Fallout, pun intended again. Where you have like Bethesda funding Fallout, and these developers might be tired of making Fallout, but Bethesda's behind them saying, "Oh, it makes money. We need to do the next one, so gear up for the next one." And there's certain developers who are excited about it, and there's some who aren't, and they're done. They want to move on to something else. And then we're gonna make the Elder Scrolls 6. Okay, well, it's like Skyrim and Fallout. They're kind of the same with a different coat of paint. So it's like, I'm burned out, right? And see, where does the artist like? Where do you go? You quit and you go somewhere else. So the capitalist structure has, like, if you want to be expression, if you want to have artistic expression and the freedom to do such, the capitalist society has room for it if you know how to navigate it.
Yes.
And it's like, if you're tired of this game or you're tired of working for this company, go work for someone else. It's voluntary too. And we have the freedoms to take jobs and and apply our skills at any company we want, as long as we land jobs, or maybe even take the risks like Stardew Valley and Minecraft, where you're making your game on your own and you find success there. You still have the freedom to do that. Now, those stories, the Minecraft and Stardew Valley, are terrifying, because these people were starving and super poor, relationship strained, and that's a whole different conversation that you can even apply to mainstream, crunch time, applying all this pressure to developers,
balance,
right? Work-life balance, and like how you want to do that. All of that to say is there is room for both. It has happened. It does exist. There are games out there that can have artists expressing themselves, and there's more easy and more difficult ways with which to make that happen.
Yeah, I would say, if we were to boil down the conversation to the original, the question in our title, which is, does it ruin games? I would say, no, not necessarily.
Not all the time.
Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. Because like you said, there are examples, there are success stories out there, there are examples. And just a game taking off doesn't, by its that own merit, mean it's going to be bad.
Right.
Neither does a game being super obscure mean it's automatically going to be good. So some very obscure games are also very, very bad.
Yeah, a lot of them are very bad. Have you ever seen like the Steam list of games that come out every day?
Yeah.
Or even on the PlayStation Network, every Tuesday, there's like a huge list of trash that just comes out.
There's plenty of AAA titles that are trash.
Right.
There's plenty. Yeah, there's any configuration, possible configuration of examples you could give, it's out there.
Yep.
There's also a ton of like middling games that are like that's just okay. And
Yeah.
some of them are mainstream, some of them are indie. Like, literally every possible conceivable permeation exists.
Yep.
So, but it is still an interesting question. So it brings us to our last topic. And we've kind of touched on similar questions before, which is should a game being mainstream affect your buying decisions, purchasing decisions?
No, absolutely not. There's no reason to ever...
For better or for worse, I agree. You should never buy a game just because it's mainstream. You should never buy a game because it's... Or you should never not buy a game because it's mainstream. My personal opinion is the single greatest motivation for game purchasing should be the recommendations of people you actually trust and care about.
That's true. Yep. And that's doing your diligence to find reviews and read articles, look at gameplay videos and assess what you want. That's not discrediting the bias.
Yes.
If Nintendo drops a new title, new IP, I'm going to be all over it. I'm going to give it way more attention than I would.
But you're doing so because
studio.
you trust it. You have
Right.
a sense of trust.
I know
because
Nintendo
of
can
the
do
history.
it because they're mainstream. So that's
Right.
that's the bias, right?
Oh,
it's like,
I see. My reasons for trusting Nintendo are not because they're mainstream.
well, yeah, I know.
Because
And
there
I'm
are
not-
plenty of mainstream
yeah.
publishers I don't trust. It's more about their history. It's more
Yes,
about
that's true.
they have proved themselves
Right.
as a
That's
developer
true.
I can trust.
I guess that's different from
Same thing
mainstream.
with like CD Projekt Red.
Right.
I trust them.
Oh my gosh,
yeah.
yeah.
I actually Obsidian.
Cyberpunk.
I trust them. That's why I'm more interested in Outer Worlds
Yeah.
than I have been with any Fallout game. Is because I actually trust Obsidian as a developer as opposed to Bethesda. So I get that. To me, it's more about trust from a history. But if there's a game that I'm on the fence about, I'm not sure. Maybe it's mainstream, maybe it's not. But I'm interested in it.
Yeah.
I'm going to check with friends and say, hey, have you played this?
Mm-hmm.
And if they have, hey, why'd you like it?
Right.
What did you like about it?
Mm-hmm.
Because I know that your opinion. But yeah, I would say for sure not. The word we have been avoiding is the word hip, or at least I've been avoiding is the word hipster.
Yeah.
But I feel like the whole the quote hipster mentality of being like, this game is mainstream, so I'm not going to buy it. I think that's a fallacy.
Yeah,
I think you're depriving yourself because you've got this weird mental hang up that you can't get past.
And that's the elitist. That's one of the dangers of games becoming mainstream, or at least in our culture. You have this elitist mentality. We've touched on it tonight, but we haven't really talked about it yet. And we might be running a little late.
That's fine. We're still within the bounds.
It's the this elitist mentality of like, I'm a true fan because I followed it from the beginning. So this new one that's dumbed down for mainstream audiences clearly doesn't deserve my attention or my recommendation. But that person is probably dying to want to play it super hard. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Dying to want to play the next entry in this game.
Yeah.
But he's an elitist and he's letting that mentality
Right,
get
yeah.
in front of him, and he's talking it down and he's telling others not to play it, and he's nothing but sabotaging someone else's possible amazing experience.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I think that's damaging.
That's
It's
very
super
damaging,
damaging.
yeah.
But that's more of a cultural gamer perspective, which we've talked about, the entitled
Mm-hmm.
gamer, or like how to toxicity, etc., and how that comes out in the gaming culture.
Yeah.
And that's one of the consequences of mainstream gaming. It's why I'm bringing it up tonight.
Mm-hmm.
And this topic is just don't be that elitist person. Like,
Right.
I was there. I've done
Or
it
don't try to
before.
take someone else's. Yeah, don't try to ruin someone else's joy just because you don't like something. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, if you're not going to buy it, whatever. Don't buy it because it's mainstream. You might be depriving yourself of a great experience, but maybe that's part of what makes a game great for you is its relative obscurity.
And you see it a countless amount of
But
times.
just don't try to rob someone else's
Right, yeah.
of their.
You
Of
see
their
it
yeah.
everywhere.
Everywhere. Yeah,
Everywhere.
exactly.
On Reddit, on YouTube, on Twitter. The
Oh, I
comments
can't believe
are
these
nuts.
idiots play Diablo 3. I'm Diablo 2 purist.
Right.
Like, whatever. Screw you. And Diablo 3 had its issues at launch, but I think Diablo 3's Reaper of Souls fixed the game to the point where it's almost better than Diablo 2 in a lot of ways, especially by
first
modern
line.
game. Yeah, especially by modern game standards. So, it's an interesting conversation, and it ties into a lot of topics we've hit on before. So I hope it wasn't too rambly.
I don't think so. I think it's
But I
really
think
good.
I think that we can probably end there. Just don't be a jerk.
Right. Be nice to people.
Yeah, be nice to people.
Lift
Be
people
good to
up.
one another. Be kind.
Your words matter.
Yeah, if you
Everything
don't-
you type on the keyboard onto someone on the internet, it matters.
Yeah, someone's gonna read it, and it matters. So everything you say over a podcast matters. We try to be kind. So let us know where we may be off base. Let us know where we may be objectively wrong, and let us know what your opinions are on. What do you think? Do you think mainstream appeal ruins games, or do you think it's more complicated than that? Or do you think that it's a completely bunk idea altogether and mainstream games are the best? So just let us know whatever your gamut of opinions are, whatever your thoughts are. And Termite will tell the good listeners and good podcasters where, once again, they can find us.
You can find us at 80bitpodsmash.com, 80bitpodsmash.com. That's our landing website with all of the links to all of our podcasting platforms, as well as our various social media websites, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Reddit, Discord. Please interact with us. You can email us as well. Go to iTunes, leave us a review so that we can bubble up in the algorithms to get more exposure, so we can create better content for you.
Fantastic. So next week, we're going to be finishing off, kind of half finishing off, but hitting off the last check mark on our Gaming by the Decades series. We're going to be hitting the last decade that we have
The
a
80s.
completed decade on, which is the 80s.
Yep.
And then we will really tie the bow on the series when we do Gaming by the Decades for the 2010s, when the 2010s are officially over.
Which is just in a few weeks.
Which is in a few weeks. That's crazy. So, but yes, we wanted to make sure that we squeezed in the 80s before we finished off the series. So yes, we'll be talking about mainstream gaming in the 80s.
Yes, we will. It'll be great.
And yeah, so you guys know how that goes, and hopefully you'll look forward to it. I've enjoyed the Gaming by the Decade. It's sort of a different approach at a lot of the same things we've talked about. But yeah, we'll be doing that next week.
See you next week.